of those, we can say that 19 have been saved completely. 15 have been lost. We've got 14 that are in some phase of progress. There are 19 that are still endangered. There's no change, and three more that we would consider still very much threatened, and 7 we count as deteriorating. So less and less chance of them being saved. One of the things we debated this year was how to deal with buildings that have been lost to fire or that have had a fire and are very much damaged. So this is not really on the list. It's kind of a concern category we want to bring to people's attention. You may remember Pullman Hall over on Taylor Street not long ago had a disastrous fire. It's a question about what will happen to it in the future. The entire warehouse part that used to be the eating hall was the primary part that was lost. There is an office part up closer to Walton Way, which looks intact on the outside, but it's debatable about the structural integrity of it. And then this fire, which was on 4th Street just about a month or 2 ago, had 4 units in it, and people lost their place of residence. The owner lives in Atlanta. Question about what will he do? Will he restore it? Will he not? But the biggest issue, I mean, we've had other ones that built a house on Telfair Street, was struck by lightning last year, and another one that was the old rectory of the St. Mary's Catholic Church up on Monsanto was also struck by lightning that same week, and both of those are lost. The biggest question when you have fire is, what's the immediate response? Rain, first of all, the fire comes, but then the rain is the biggest enemy, because if it's left open, then it just continues to deteriorate. Whereas if you secured it quickly, you might be able to save the building. We had a fire, we are involved with Union Baptist Church on Green Street, and it has an old parsonage behind it that was restored, that we were involved in. That had a fire. We quickly responded to it, and it was restored, and it's back in use as it's a rental unit to help support the church. So fire is a big issue, and we didn't list it. We didn't list any specific building this year. We just wanted to bring attention to that. There's so many causes, lightning strikes, carelessness. We've seen so many different ones in the past years, but fire is really one of the biggest enemies. All right. So this year, we are naming 4 properties to our endangered list that have not been listed before. And these are not in any particular order. They are just 4 more or less equal properties that we're concerned about, that we would like to see preserved and continue to have a history in Augusta. The first on our list is Cumming Grove Baptist Church on Gardner Street, which is in the Sand Hills National Register Historic District. Cumming Grove was founded by African Americans in the 1840s. It's the oldest church on the hill of the Somerville Hill area. It was deeded over to the congregation in the 1860s, right after the Civil War. The building has evolved over the years, but what you see here is very much a historic building. It's a important presence in that neighborhood, and we'd love to see it maintained. The congregation would too, but it has issues, and several members of the congregation are here, including the pastor, has maintenance and structural issues, and it would be nice if those could be addressed and the church could remain in its present location. There's a lot of development pressure around it, and so we wanted to express our concern publicly by listing it in the endangered properties list. By the way, this is the 2020 endangered properties list. It's kind of like a new car. You you announce a list in the fall, and that's your mate for the next year. Okay, the next one is has a long history. It was built as a house, and more recently it was known as the Strothers Old Folks Home. It's at 1243 Lanny Walker Boulevard. And it was built as an actual house about 1916 for a family. Lanny Walker is such an important corridor and thoroughfare, and we're losing more and more historic buildings along the way. Historic Augusta, we're going to hear a little bit more about that, recently has purchased and is trying and is beginning to restore and looking for a new owner through our revolving fund for the C.T. Walker House, Reverend C.T. Walker, who was the founder of Tabernacle Baptist Church. Everybody kind of forgotten where he actually lived, but Laney Walker is named partly for Lucy Craft Laney and partly for C.T. Walker, so it's important that that house is preserved. But this house and other ones along its way, it's not a good idea to just preserve one thing and let everything else go down in the neighborhood. And that's what we would, there's been a lot of erosion of historic properties along Laney Walker Boulevard, but this is a particularly important landmark and it needs to be saved. It's vacant now. It has not been occupied for some time, but it does seem to appear to be salvageable, and would love to see a new use for it and try to help find a new owner for it, or the present owner could utilize it and find a use for it as well. The third property we're naming this year is the fire station at 902 James Brown Boulevard. This is in the corner of Dias Park, right at the corner of Datnack and James Brown, or the old 9th Street. This is Fire Engine Company number 2. It's interesting that the fire department in Augusta was not founded until the 1870s. Prior to that, individual fire companies, which are kind of like clubs, were formed all around town, and they had their own halls. As much a social event as anything else. But in the 1870s, the city established the fire department. And in around 1890 to 92, the first two city-built fire houses were built by the city of Augusta's fire department. And this was one of those two. It's built about 1890. To serve that area of town, and it did so for many years until it was replaced. Honestly, I can't tell you what replaced it, but it must be fairly close by. Maybe one on Walton Way nearby. But in any case, it was used as a community center in the park for a long time, but it's vacant now. They say there's a need for a new community center in the park, and the city commission has talked about they should just tear this down. Well, you can have a new community center and not tear this down and find another use for it. So we're advocating for that. Either convert it to some good use that the city can use in that park, or let somebody else do something with it if the city can't do that. So again, we listed to just point out the need to preserve this historic and beautiful building. Now, like some other fire department fire halls, it did have a bell tower one time that went up above this area. I found a very bad picture of it from the 1890s. And other fire departments seem to always have that, but for whatever reason it was taken off. Nevertheless, the architectural integrity is largely intact, and there's plenty there to use and preserve. And finally, the last building is this one at 840 Reynolds Street. It is right at the corner of the Augusta Common on the Reynolds Street side. That would be on the south side of Reynolds Street at the corner of the Common. Interesting about this, we did a little research on it. It is a historic building built in about 1901, 1902. It was built by a woman named Mary Cleckley. She started the Augusta trunk factory. Back in those days, everybody needed a trunk if you needed to store things in your house or when you traveled. And she had a very successful business at a time when very few women owned businesses, and certainly very few women built buildings of their own. And she actually built this in 1901, 1902. Her business started before that. But she made these trunks and sold them not just in Augusta but all over the country at the time. And so the building continued for uses, various uses. If you look at the side of it, it says Belk, so I think it was a warehouse that just stored things like typical buildings. But we think it's an important historic character defining building at the corner of the Common. And in fact, only recently did they determine that there was some structural issues on the inside. The roof is failing. It was going to be turned into a micro pub, which seemed to me to be a really good use right on the Common. And we're still hoping that or something similar can be worked out for this building. But time will tell, and we are working with the owners to try to determine what the future is of the building. So those are our 4 this year announcements. I might just say that when we started this list, our list was very long, and as the years go by, we don't ever take something off the list if it's already been listed as endangered until it's been saved or until it's been lost. So our list has gotten shorter because we've got a lot. We try to work with the property owners to come up with solutions, and so the list is shorter this year, but it's nevertheless not any less significant. I'm going to introduce Robin Anderson, and she's going to give you some updates on previous listings. Thank you.
Well, good morning again, everyone. I'm very excited to share some updates that we've been working on, not only this year, but it seems like even 2 or 3 years since we've been doing our endangered properties list. There have been several that have been very active. The building that you're in today, we actually listed this complex, the Court of Ordinary and the former Congregation Children of Israel Synagogue, to our 2014 list. And this is a rendering of what the Augusta Jewish Museum will hopefully be once the construction and the rehab of the buildings are complete. The Augusta Jewish Museum is working to rehab the building that we're in currently to serve as their support administrative space, but also for the really beginnings of the museum that will ultimately be put into the synagogue. So the Jewish Museum Board does have architectural plans that they're hoping to put out to bid shortly. They are fundraising. They are looking for volunteers. They've got a website that you can visit in order to learn more about the goal of the Augusta Jewish Museum, but also the long history of these 2 buildings. So that is something that we are working with them very diligently on, and we are looking forward to really having the next 12 to 16 months show some good progress on this project. Another one that has been on our list for some time is Carr's Grocery. We actually listed it in 2011. It's very prominent at the corner of Green Street and 4th Street in the Old Town neighborhood. It was built circa 1850s. It was primarily the grocer. Carr's Grocery is named for the Carr family. And then it had several other uses. I think a lot of people remember it as the Green Street Laundromat. And then the building has sat vacant, and particularly the upper floors were really just frozen in time while that first floor commercial space was adapted into that laundromat space. But it was purchased earlier this year by some preservation-minded investors. They are in the process of doing a certified rehab on the building to get state and federal tax credits, and it'll be income-producing apartments, including the first floor. So that is going to be very exciting, and hopefully will be finished mid-2020 next year. So if you haven't driven by that lately, make sure you go by, because it's a very handsome building and it's very prominent and will really re-energize that kind of fringe area of our Old Town neighborhood. Well, another one that a lot of us have been hearing about is Lamar Elementary School. We actually listed Lamar Elementary School itself to our endangered properties list in 2013. Prior to that, we kind of had this overarching theme of the surplus schools that the Board of Education had. But of course, what has been talked about is the potential for demolishing the Lamar School to either have the stadium for ARC or some other use for the Academy of Richmond County, which is directly across the street. But our stance is that it's extremely significant. It's a good, intact building. It does have use if the school board cannot use it for educational facilities. We know that there are some people that would certainly be interested in purchasing it to do some income-producing apartments. It's in a brand new National Register Historic District. It's listed in the Woodlawn neighborhood, so it is listed as contributing to the neighborhood for its architectural and historical significance. So it is definitely something that is on our radar, and we're very encouraged that there's a very active alumni association who seems to be kind of taking charge and making sure that they're in the discussions of what the overall plan is, not only for Lamar School, but the ARC campus as well. So we will continue to monitor that as the weeks and the months roll by. Something else that has been on our minds lately and in the news very recently is the new Savannah Bluff Lock and Dam. You may remember that we listed this to our endangered properties list in 2018. It's a little bit different, but it's really not different. It is a historic structure, and so as a historic structure, it is eligible for listing and has been determined eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. And so we have been really keeping as much track of all the discussions that are going on, and what has come to light most recently was the stance of the Corps of Engineers to propose demolition of the structure. But Historic Augusta feels that it absolutely needs to be preserved and protected. We agree with the lawsuit that has recently been filed in South Carolina. And of course, we'll just continue to do all that we can, and we hope that the city of Augusta will also join in and stand their ground while this important preservation issue is being tackled. And as Eric mentioned, we are so pleased with our efforts with the C.T. Walker House over there at 1011 Laney Walker Boulevard. Historic Augusta listed this house, which was the residence of Reverend C.T. Walker, who founded Tabernacle Baptist Church, as you were told earlier. We listed this in our 2009 Endangered Properties edition. So this was one of the early ones, and this was one that we as an organization had just watched deteriorate, and we knew that we had to step in. And so we stepped in by using our revolving fund, purchasing the property in 2016, and slowly but surely making progress. And so we just met at the house yesterday. We have had several very generous grants that have helped us to do this rehab in phases. What you see here is phase 2, where we are making the exterior envelope weather tight. The roof has already been completed. So all of the siding was either scrapped or salvaged, depending on what condition it was in, and new siding is being milled. So in the next 2 weeks, this house should have a complete facelift. But of course, it is done being very sensitive to the historic character of the house, any original materials that were intact and that could be salvaged. We have engaged a local real estate agent. She is currently showing that property, and our hope is that we will find that preservation-minded buyer who will then be able to rehab the interior of this house for whatever that use may be. So Historic Augusta will be responsible for rehabbing and stabilizing the outside, and we will work to find a buyer who will make this home what it once was. And so with that, we are happy to answer any questions. We are happy, I think, to answer any questions about this building here as well. And of course, you'll get the newsletter on your way out, or actually Abigail can hand that out while we're talking. So are there any questions?
We have one.
Yes.
In listening to the presentation and the information, the thought that comes to my mind is the details of the information involved with what it takes to reserve or preserve historic property. What's all involved with that, as far as some of the things I've heard, as far as acquisition, grants, et cetera, et cetera. What's all involved with that? And do you look for preservationists or investors, or who are you looking for, you know, for that?
Sure.
Well, so basically, every place is different. There are different circumstances, different eligibility for different programs, or there may not be any programs. It may just be something that the individual or the organization has to do themselves. But you always need to start with a plan, and the plan would be a good assessment of the building, what's exactly wrong, what needs to be done to make it right, and then, and usually that would involve an architect, probably an engineer, and then you would determine the cost of that by bringing in contractors that can do that, and determine, like sometimes you do it in phases, as you mentioned on the Walker House, and the most critical part is usually the roof and the foundation, and if you can get those things shored up, then it buys you some time. So it just depends. There's no magic one size fits all. No one funding source applies to every property. Churches are particularly difficult because the government doesn't like to give money to churches, which you've probably already determined. So it's difficult to find things sometimes, but not impossible. But the main thing is to have a plan, and that's something that we can sit down with Cumming Grove. I know you represent Cumming Grove Baptist, and we would be happy to sit down with you and discuss coming up with such a plan and how to do that.